So, you want to own a Silk Road caravan, 1,000 camels under load, bells ringing across the dunes at first light, the richest trade route on Earth stretching out ahead of you. Here's a real number from the year 1340. One merchant's cargo on that road was worth 25,000 gold florins. An ordinary laborer would need 9 centuries of work to earn that much, and every coin of it swayed through open desert on the backs of animals. Very few people think about who financed a fortune like this. Still ask what happened when a king died halfway through the journey, or why the man leading those camels owned almost nothing they carried. This is what running a caravan actually looked like from the inside. Not what the poet sang, what the silver did. So, build one using a genuine instruction manual written by a banker who never dared make the trip himself. And let's follow the money all the way to China. The manual is real and it still exists. It's called The Practice of Trade, written around 1340 by Francesco Pegalotti, employee of the Bardi Bank in Florence. It reads like a travel guide crossed with a spreadsheet. What to pack, who to hire, what each stage of the road costs, what a pound of Chinese silk sells for when you finally arrive. Pegalotti compiled all of it from merchants who came back. He himself never went anywhere. The entire guide was written at a desk in Florence. Now, the first thing the manual destroys is the picture in your head. You are not buying 1,000 camels. When the traveler Ibn Battuta described caravans, he talked about convoys of 1,000 animals, sometimes 12,000. But those weren't one man's property. They were pools, dozens of merchants traveling together. Because the desert punishes anyone alone, Pagalotti puts it plainly, go with about 60 men in company, and you'll be as safe as if you were in your own house. You don't even own most of the animals. You hire transport stage by stage, ox wagons across the steppe, camel wagons after that, pack asses through the mountains. Belong to local drivers who know their own stretch of road and nothing beyond it. So, here's your first correction. A caravan was not a fleet. It was a venture, a moving pile of capital that happened to have animals attached. And the manual's first serious piece of advice isn't about camels at all. It's about who you hire. Start with the number that dwarfs everything else, the cargo. Pegalotti's worked example assumes a merchant carrying goods worth 25,000 gold florins. In Florence, florin was roughly a month of an unskilled laborer's wages, about 13 days at 4.5 soldi per day. 25,000 florins comes to more than 300,000 working days. A laborer who started earning that pile while Rome was still falling apart would have finished just in time to load the camels. That's the cargo. Now, guess what the road itself costs? Pegalotti budgets 60 to 80 sami of silver for the entire outbound journey. Every wagon, driver, every meal from the Black Sea to Beijing. A sama was worth about 5 florins, so call it 300 to 400 florins of travel costs. Do the arithmetic. 300 florins of expenses on a 25,000 florin cargo. That's between 1% and 2%. Moving a fortune across Asia was cheap. Fortune itself was the hard part. As for staff, the manual is oddly specific. Forget armies of guards. Your safety is the convoy itself, 60 men deep. What Pegalotti insists on is a dragoman, the translator, plus at least 2 servants who speak Cuman, the language of the steppe. And he warns you not to go cheap. A good interpreter's wages, he writes, will cost you less than what a bad one loses you. On the most dangerous road on earth, the highest paid man you hire is the one who talks, which leaves one small issue. You're a mid-level Florentine trader. You do not have 25,000 florins. Almost nobody does. So, you're about to take the largest loan of your life from a man you may never meet. The deal that makes your caravan possible is called a comma. And by 1340, it's already 2 centuries old. One we can name was signed in Genoa in 1156 between an investor called Ingo de Volta and a young trader called Ansaldo Bayardo. Genoa's notaries recorded more than 8,000 contracts like it over the next 150 years. Strip away the Latin and the deal is simple and brutal. An investor puts up the capital, you do the traveling. When you return, the investor's money comes back first. Then the profit gets split. 75% to him, 25% to you. From your side of the table, the deal reads differently. You will walk to China. You will be gone more than a year. You will risk sandstorms, bandits, and border officials. And you keep a quarter. There's a second version where you stake 1/3 of the capital yourself and split profits evenly. Better if you have 1/3 to stake. Either way, the money is now real, the goods are bought, and the road is waiting. Here's what it looks like. You start at Tana, a trading post on the Black Sea. 25 days by Aksu Wagon gets you to Astrakhan. Then a day's sail to Sarai. 8 more days to Sarich. 20 more by Camel Wagon to Urgent. 35 to 40 days to Otar. 5 by Pakas to Almalik. Then 70 across the desert to Gonzo. Rivers and roads carry you the rest of the way to Konvalik. Beijing 8 months to a year one way. The road works because someone built rest stops, caravans, sries, walladins with water, fodder, and beds. 30 to 40 kilometers on the busy stretches. That's one day's march. It's not a coincidence. It's infrastructure space to the pace of a loaded camel. And it has to be because when a camel finally drinks, it can swallow 25 gallons in one stand. 2 warnings from the manual before you set out. First, if a local lord dies while you're in his territory, the roads dissolve into chaos until a successor takes power. Trade waits on politics. Second, and worse, if you die out there without a brother or sworn partner beside you, your goods don't go home to your investor. The local lord takes everything. 8 months in, you have spent a fortune and earned nothing. Not one coin has come back yet. Here's where the whole machine flips. Start with the income everyone can guess. Buy where it's cheap. Dear. Those gaps were real. Spices bought in Asia sold in Europe at 10 to 100 times their source price. A century later in London, a single pound of saffron still cost a master craftsman 23 days of wages, 1 pound. And silk moved in serious volume in the 1330s. One merchant sold thousands of pounds of Chinese silk in Genoa alone. But before you start counting your 75 to 1 returns, there's a correction the legend leaves out. Almost nobody carried goods from China to Italy. The road worked as a relay. Cargo hopped from oasis to oasis, sold and resold. Each trader working the stretch he knew and taking his margin before passing the goods along. By the time silk reached Aino's dock, a dozen hands had touched it and a dozen cuts had come out of that famous markup. The 1,000% profit existed. You feed. It just belonged to 12 different people, so your slice of the silk trade is thinner than the songs claim. Which is fine because ironically the silk was the least interesting thing on your camels. Watch what Pegalotti actually tells you to do. Say load up with goods in Italy. He says travel light, carry linen cloth as far as urgent and sell it there. Then convert everything into bars of silver and carry the silver east. At the Chinese border, something strange happens. The Khan's officials take your silver, for all of it, straight into the imperial treasury. In exchange, they hand you paper, printed notes called bichi, the first paper currency most Europeans had ever seen, which the state forces every merchant in China to accept. Then you spend the paper, is where the road pays you. At the fixed rates, Pegalotti records 1 samo of silver converts into 19 to 20 of Chinese silk. You ran the same value through 3 different forms of money: cloth, silver, paper, 40, and came out the far side holding goods worth multiples of what you left with. You were never really hauling merchandise across Asia. You were moving money between currency zones and skimming profit off every conversion. Once you understand that, the other income streams stop being surprising. Merchants on this road lent money at interest aggressively enough that a yuan official named Wang Yun complained about their rates on the record. They moved value on paper. An instrument called Oaha could be written in one city and cashed 1,000 miles away. So the wealth crossed the desert while nothing worth stealing rode the camel. They ran diplomacy as a business, tribute missions to the Chinese court, or trade wearing a costume, gifts going in, goods coming out. As one Tibetan document admitted, paying tribute today is only to ask for tea. Even the return trip earned. Horses, jade, glassware, furs, and silver all flowed east, so the camels never walked empty. By month 9, somewhere past the Chinese border, reaches its strangest point. Your entire fortune, the investor's 25,000 florins, the year of your life, all of it now exists as printed paper backed by nothing except one man's word. A caravan was not a delivery service. It was a bank in motion, a credit network, currency exchange, and a courier service that happened to smell like camels. And the biggest bank on the road had a very unusual owner. The Mongol Empire didn't just tax this trade, it invested in it, known as the orto. The arrangement worked like this. A Khan or a Mongol prince advanced capital to a merchant. Silver ingots, paper money, goods. The merchant traded with it or lent it out, and profits were split by contract, state money, private hustle, but the capital wasn't even the best part. Ortok merchants received a Pisa tablet stamped with imperial authority that functioned as passport and credit card in one. It opened the Yam, the empire's relay network, fresh horses, food, beds, armed escort, station after station, across 5,000 kilometers. The Polo family traded under exactly this system. Single best business on the Silk Road was being partners with the government. Now the fine print, because the fine print is where this deal turns on you. In the early decades, the Ordo worked like your commanda. The prince ate the losses up to his invested capital. But by the late 1200s, the structure had quietly shifted from investment to loan. Same silver, same Pisa. Except now, if the venture failed, the debt was yours personally without limit. The empire had to risk itself onto your shoulders, and most merchants signed anyway. Then come the rules that bind everyone partner or not. At Tana, before you've traveled a single mile, silk pays an export duty by the pound. Our sources disagree on whether the rate was 5 aspers or 15, which tells you something about how contested these tolls were even then. Gold, silver, and pearls pass duty-free. Your nationality is a tariff bracket. Genoese and Venetians pay 4% where everyone else pays 5% because their cities cut treaties. And at every city gate along the route, an official stamps your goods with the tonga, the commercial tax of the Mongol world, at whatever rate the local ruler currently charges. Add it all up, and by now the venture looks unstoppable. State partnership, fixed exchange rates, a road that prints money literally in China's case. So now let's talk about what breaks it. Go back to Pegalotti at his desk in Florence and the most famous sentence in his manual. The road from Tana to Cathay, he writes, is perfectly safe whether by day or by night. He never tested that sentence, not once. The men who did test it told a different story. Marco Polo's family lost years to wars and closed borders on this same route, and plenty of travelers simply never came back. Modern historians read Pegalotti's perfectly safe the way you'd read a brochure. You already know the two clauses that can end you. King closes the roads and your own death hands everything to a stranger. Now watch both happen at scale to the best protected caravan in history. In 1218, Genghis Khan financed a trade caravan to the Empire of Khorasan. Around 450 merchants carrying gold, silver, sable furs, silk, state capital, state protection, the strongest backer on the planet. The caravan reached the border city of Otar. The governor there, a man named Inaluk, looked at the richest convoy he'd ever seen, declared the merchant spies, and executed nearly all of them. Goods were sold off in Bukhara, 450 men, and the ultimate ordo deal erased by one official's greed. Genghis Khan responded by invading Khorasan, and that empire ceased to exist. On this road, a trade dispute could delete a civilization, but notice what it couldn't do. Couldn't bring the caravan back. Even the most powerful man alive could not make this business safe. And when a venture failed, it didn't only lose money. It stranded people. In 1907, explorer opened a ruined watchtower west of Dunhuang and found a mailbag that had been waiting 16 centuries. Inside were letters from Sogdian traders written around the year 3 and 13, sealed, addressed, and never delivered. One merchant, Nanai Vanak, reports that his colleagues in the Chinese capital have starved to death as the markets collapsed. He dictates what amounts to a will. He expects, in his own words, murder and robbery. Another letter is from a woman. Her name was Mune, a merchant's wife left behind in Dunhuang when the money ran out. Abandoned, she and her daughter were reduced to servitude. Her letter home ends with a curse on the husband who left her there. It never reached him. That's the floor under all this arithmetic. Failed caravan was somebody stranded at the far end of Asia. And in the end, the road itself failed the same way. In 1347, the plague arrived, traveling the same routes as the silk. In 1368, the Yuan dynasty fell and China closed. Chinese silk stopped reaching Europe, spiked, and Italian cities responded by planting mulberry trees and raising their own silkworms. Within a generation, the greatest trade route on Earth was an asset class that no longer existed. So, knowing all of it, the margins and the massacres, should you have bought in? Run the good year first. In a good year, the road is open. The cons are alive. Your goods clear the gates. Gross markups on the right cargo run 10 to 100 times cost. But you know better now than to count that as profit after the duties at Tana, the Tamga at every gate, the drivers, Dragoman, and the investors 75%. Historians estimate a merchant's realistic net return could shrink to around 10% on more than a year of your life in an era when the downside was unlimited personal debt or a grave past urgent. A good year on the Silk Road paid like a solid business, not like a legend, except when it paid like a legend. A Venetian named Romano Morono went bankrupt in the Eastern trade, kept going, built his entire fortune on a single pepper voyage in 1173 that sold for multiples of its cost. One run. That's the honest description of this asset. Not a steady 10%, but a violent average of ruins and jackpots. Now the bad year. Capital is late model or talk money alone. The route closes because a Khan died, or a governor got ambitious, or the plague arrived first. The goods are gone, and the debt survives. Or you die 11 months out. You beside you and a stranger inherits your investor's fortune while your family learns nothing for years. So family gawks. So who actually got rich? Look at the Karemi merchants of Egypt, the spice lords at the road's western end. Ordinary wholesale merchants of their day were worth around 30,000 dinars. The Karimi ran fortunes from a 100,000 dinars up. One of them, Ibn Yasser al-Isi, was said to be worth 10 million. And the difference between them and the man buried past urgent wasn't courage, and it wasn't better camels. The winners never bet on one cargo. They ran family agents in every major city. They held state partnerships and carried the right stamped metal. They earned as much from lending and exchange as from goods. When one route died, network simply rerouted around it. The losers were single venture men. All capital, one road, one role. So could you have gotten rich owning a Silk Road caravan? It depends on what you actually owned. If you owned goods on camels, you were gambling a year of your life for a middleman's slice of a famous markup. If you owned the network, the contracts, the credit, The partnership with power. This trade built some of the largest private fortunes of the medieval world. The camels never made anyone rich. Paperwork did. One last detail the merchants would have found funny. The name Silk Road appears nowhere in their world. No contract uses it, no manual, no letter. A German geographer coined the phrase in 1877, 5 centuries after the last Yuan caravan unloaded. The men who actually ran the route never knew they were on it. They just knew the market, and maybe they understood the business better than the name does, because a Silk Road caravan was never really in the business of moving silk. It was in the business of moving money across currencies, across empires, across a desert where paper was safer than silver.